Some cars were built to impress, some to dominate the road, but they were built cheap, ugly, and barely drivable. The kind of cars that broke down more than they ran, and sadly, they were often the only option for people with tight wallets. Today, we bring you 15 worst and crappy cars that only poor people could afford.
Dear viewers, we have set a goal to reach 30,000 subscribers by the end of this year. With your support, we can make it happen. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey. Thank you.
The 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback is often portrayed in movies, magazines, and car shows as a holy grail of American motoring, a symbol of freedom and rebellion wrapped in sheet metal. But strip away the glossy nostalgia, the Hollywood car chases, and the endless worship from collectors, and what you're left with is something far less divine. An old, cheaply built coupe that rattled itself to pieces, handled like a boat with a broken rudder, and had more bark than bite. People treat it as though it was a rolling god, but in reality, it was closer to an overpriced tin can with a galloping horse glued to the grill. Let's start with the build quality. The 1967 Mustang Fastback might look sleek from a distance, especially in the candy-colored paint and polished chrome we see today, but anyone who has ever driven one knows the truth. The moment you close the door, it doesn't thud with confidence. It clangs like a junkyard fridge. Every panel flexes, the trim squeaks, and the dashboard buzzes like a cheap transistor radio. Hit a bump, and the entire interior rattles like a shopping cart full of empty soda cans rolling over gravel. Comfort? Forget it. The vinyl seats were thin, the padding was lumpy, and the driving position made long trips feel like punishment rather than pleasure. The brakes were a true exercise in faith. Pressing the pedal in a 67 Fastback feels less like stopping a car and more like stepping into a pile of wet cardboard. You'd push, the car would shrug, and eventually, maybe, the drums would heat up enough to slow you down. On highways or steep downhills, the experience was closer to praying than driving. Modern reviewers who test these cars today often walk away stunned, asking, how did anyone survive the 60s with brakes like this? Owners had to leave miles of space just to stop safely, and panic stops were less about precision and more about whether you'd hit the ditch or the car in front of you first. And then there's the so-called muscle. Yes, the Fastback could be ordered with a V8, and yes, it made a throaty noise, but let's be honest, it was not the tire-shredding monster people love to remember. The base six-cylinder was downright embarrassing, struggling to get the Mustang moving without sounding like a lawnmower with asthma. Even some of the smaller V8s, like the 289, delivered noise than actual fury. Only the big block options gave the Mustang real speed. And even then, the car's sloppy handling made it terrifying to use that power. Owners who bought into the advertising hype quickly realized the truth. This wasn't a precision muscle machine. It was an economy coupe in drag strip clothing. A Mustang? More like a rusty mule struggling up a hill. The handling was another cruel joke. Ford engineers gave the Fastback styling cues that made it look like a road racer, but on real roads, it was closer to piloting a boat on stormy water. The steering was vague and over-assisted, so turning the wheel felt like spinning an old fan with no real connection to the road. Cornering produced more body roll than a drunk trying to stand upright, and the rear end would happily step out without warning, especially in the rain. Tires squealed at the slightest provocation, and instead of feeling like Steve McQueen in Bullitt, most drivers felt like nervous amateurs desperately trying not to end up in a ditch. Rust was another demon. For all its supposed toughness, the 67 Mustang had the structural integrity of wet cardboard. Floor pans, rocker panels, and fenders rusted within years, especially in northern climates. Owners would joke that the car was the first pony you had to keep in a barn or it'd rot away. Keeping one intact required constant welding, patching, and replacement panels, turning ownership into an endless battle against oxidation. It didn't help that Ford cut costs wherever possible, leaving gaps in rust-proofing that made corrosion inevitable. By the late 1970s, many Mustangs had dissolved into piles of flaky metal, forcing mechanics to joke that the only thing holding them together was their own paint jobs. And yet, despite all these flaws, Cheap build quality, cardboard brakes, underwhelming engines, sloppy handling, and rust-prone bodies, the 1967 Mustang Fastback became a legend. Why? Because of the image. It looked aggressive, it looked stylish, and it fit perfectly into the cultural moment. Young Americans didn't want perfect engineering. They wanted something loud, flashy, and rebellious. The Mustang delivered that fantasy, even if reality was far harsher. Movies like Bullitt cemented its status. Magazines praised its looks, and buyers ignored the fact that their dream car drove like a tractor wrapped in tin foil. In truth, the 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback is not a god of the road. It's a relic built cheaply for mass consumption, remembered more for what it symbolized than what it actually delivered. Owners who drove them daily back in the 60s and 70s often complained about the very things enthusiasts overlook today: squeaky dashboards, terrifying brake fades, embarrassing drag race losses, and the sound of rust chewing their car alive. For every glossy showpiece we see today, there were hundreds that ended up as scrap before reaching their 10th birthday. The Mustang's myth outlived the Mustang's reality. So, while collectors today might polish their 67 Fastbacks until they shine like rolling jewels, anyone who has spent time behind the wheel knows the bitter truth. It wasn't a thoroughbred racehorse. It wasn't a perfect muscle car. It was a rusty mule in a sleek costume, cheaply built, mechanically crude, and saved from obscurity only because of its looks and the dreams it sold. Strip away the nostalgia, and the Mustang Fastback is less divine steed, more stubborn donkey stumbling its way through automotive history. Would you like me to go even further and expand this into a mock owner's diary from the late 1960s, filled with daily frustrations, squeaky dashboards, terrifying brake fades, embarrassing drag race losses, and the sound of rust chewing the car alive to really drive home the comedy of owning one? The 1969 Dodge Charger RT has been elevated to near-mythic status thanks to Hollywood, car shows, and endless nostalgia. But peel away the TV glamour, and what's left is an overfed lump of steel pretending to be a performance car. Fans drool over it because they saw it sliding around on the Dukes of Hazzard or starring alongside Vin Diesel in Fast and Furious, but real-life owners who actually drove these monsters will tell you the painful truth. It's less muscle car and more Detroit obesity on 4 tires. First, the size. The hood alone looks like it belongs on an aircraft carrier. You could land a Cessna on it, host a picnic, or rent it out as real estate. Standing in front of a '69 Charger is like staring at a steel runway with headlights. And behind that endless hood, a car so massive it could blot out the sun when parked next to anything smaller than a school bus. The thing was over 200 inches long and nearly as wide, which meant it took up every inch of the lane and then some. Trying to park it in a city was like docking a battleship in a kiddie pool. The weight is another cruel joke. Dodge stuffed a huge body with heavy steel panels, making the Charger weigh nearly 2 tons. Fans brag about its big block 440 Magnum or the legendary 426 Hemi, but guess what? The car was so obese that much of that power was wasted just dragging its bloated frame down the road. It's like strapping a jet engine to a refrigerator. It might make noise and shoot in a straight line, but it sure as hell won't dance. Cornering? Forget it. Taking a turn in a Charger felt like trying to wrestle a walrus on roller skates. The body leaned so hard you wondered if the doors would scrape the pavement, and the rear end had a habit of sliding out with the grace of a drunken hippo. Owners quickly learned that spirited driving really meant hang on and pray. And let's not pretend the interior was some luxurious refuge. Sure, Dodge gave it some fancy trim and fake wood, but in practice, it was just a cavernous vinyl box where everything rattled once the car hit 50 miles per hour. The seats were wide enough to fit 3 linebackers, but about as supportive as sitting on a church pew. The dashboard plastics warped in the sun, the trim fell off with age, and road noise was so loud, it sounded like you were inside a steel drum rolling downhill. Driving one long distance was less grand touring and more grand punishment. Brakes? Laughable. Stopping a '69 Charger at highway speeds was like trying to anchor a cruise ship with a garden hose. Drum brakes were standard, which meant fade was constant and terrifying. You'd press the pedal, the car would groan, and the stopping distance could be measured in football fields. Even with the optional front discs, the Charger's bulk made sure the experience always felt more like slowing down a freight train than controlling a car. Many owners back then admitted they simply left extra miles of room just to be safe. The myth of performance is perhaps the biggest lie. Yes, on paper, the Charger RT had serious horsepower, but real-world performance was compromised by its girth, sloppy suspension, and vague steering. Magazines of the era tested the car and consistently found that while it was quick in a straight line, it was absolutely hopeless everywhere else. Handling? Non-existent. Precision? A fantasy. Road feel? Like driving with mittens on. It was a brute, yes, but a lazy one, more of a barroom brawler who passed out after one swing than a real athlete. And yet, despite all these glaring flaws, the Charger RT became a legend. Why? Not because of its engineering, not because it was a well-rounded car, but because of its looks and pop culture. The Coke bottle curves and hidden headlights gave it presence, and once Hollywood plastered it across screens, people forgot how terrible it was to actually drive. The Charger became a fashion icon, a star, and a fantasy. Meanwhile, real owners were stuck wrestling with rust, rebuilding brakes, replacing transmissions, and dealing with constant fuel bills from an engine that drank gas faster than sailors downing whiskey on shore leave. In truth, the 1969 Dodge Charger RT is no nimble muscle car. It's a bloated, obese cruiser built more for straight-line bragging rights than genuine driving enjoyment. For every fan who worships it, there are mechanics who cursed it, and owners who learn the hard way that legend doesn't always mean good. The hood was a runway, the body was a tank, the brakes were a prayer, and the handling was a comedy routine. So yes, people drool over this car, but the reality is clear. The '69 Charger wasn't a racehorse, it was a circus elephant. Big, loud, heavy, and impressive to look at, but utterly useless if you actually wanted finesse. Would you like me now to stretch this into a mock owner rant from the 1970s, where a guy complains about parking it, nearly killing himself in a corner, and how the fuel bills were higher than his mortgage? That could make it even funnier and longer.
The 1970s Chevrolet Chevelle SS454 is worshipped by muscle car fanboys like it's the holy grail of Detroit iron, but in truth, this so-called king of the streets was more of a noisy, gas-guzzling, self-destructive mess than a crown jewel. People love to quote the brochure numbers. 450 horsepower from the LS6, 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, quarter-mile times in the low 13s. But they conveniently forget to mention that all of that came wrapped in one of the most cheaply assembled, rattly, and impractical cars Chevrolet ever put on the road. Owning one wasn't like ruling the streets. It was more like babysitting a broken refrigerator with a V8 shoved inside. The myth starts under the hood. Yes, the 454 cubic inch big block was a monster on paper, but this wasn't controlled power. It was raw chaos. Hit the gas, and instead of smooth acceleration, the car lurched, fishtailed, and screamed like a banshee. With skinny bias-ply tires and zero traction control, driving a Chevelle SS454 was less about speed and more about survival. Magazine testers at the time admitted that it was terrifying to keep straight, and half the legendary burnouts people brag about were just owners losing control in their own driveways. This wasn't engineering brilliance, it was brute force duct taped to mediocrity. Then came the build quality, or lack thereof. General Motors in 1970 was cranking out cars like a factory stamping bread, and it showed. The panels rarely lined up, doors sagged after a few years, and the interior was a graveyard of cheap plastic, fake wood, and vinyl that cracked faster than glass in a hailstorm. Owners who bought these things new often found squeaks, rattles, and mysterious vibrations within months. By year 3, you had a car that felt like it was falling apart one bolt at a time. Many mechanics back then joked that the Chevelle SS was designed to keep them employed, because every visit revealed something new, broken, loose, or rusted. And oh, the fuel economy, or rather the total lack thereof. Calling it bad is an understatement. The Chevelle SS454 could burn through a tank of gas faster than a sailor on shore leave burns through pay. Owners reported single-digit mileage, and if you dared push the accelerator, you could literally see the fuel gauge needle dropping in real time. That might have been tolerable when gas was 30 cents a gallon, but as soon as the oil crisis hit, driving one of these became a financial death sentence. People who bought them in 1970 ended up trying to unload them in 1974, desperate to get rid of a car that drained their wallets faster than it emptied its carburetor. Handling was another cruel joke. While European sports cars were learning the art of balance and finesse, the Chevelle SS454 was stuck in the Stone Age. The suspension was crude, the steering was vague and overboosted, and cornering felt like piloting a sofa strapped to roller skates. Owners often admitted they drove them only in straight lines, because anything more complex than a gentle curve could become a disaster. If you pushed it hard into a bend, the body leaned like a drunken sailor, the tires screamed for mercy, and the back end threatened to swing wide and deposit you in a ditch. Braking didn't inspire confidence either. Standard drum brakes faded almost immediately, and even with optional front discs, stopping this steel leviathan from highway speeds took the distance of a football field. Durability? Practically non-existent. The mighty LS6 engine had power, yes, but it also chewed through parts and demanded constant tuning. Valve adjustments, carburetor rebuilds, gasket leaks. It was like a needy child that always wanted attention. Add to that the fact that the body rusted faster than bread going moldy, and you had a car that could literally rot away in a few winters. In northern states, many Chevelles didn't survive a decade before their fenders and floor pans dissolved into piles of orange flakes. People talk today about restoring them, but that's only because most of them were already falling apart by 1980. And yet, despite being a rattling, gas-sucking, rust-prone nightmare, the Chevelle SS454 has become a legend. Why? Because people don't remember the headaches. They remember the sound of it. They remember the sight of it idling at the curb, the way it smoked the tires in a straight line, and how the neighborhood kids thought it was the scariest thing on four wheels. Hollywood and magazines turned it into a myth, polishing away all the reality. What fans worship as the king of the streets was in reality a one-dimensional brute that could only impress in short bursts before rattling itself to pieces. Owning one today is even bigger a joke. Collectors pay absurd money for what is essentially a dressed-up time bomb, bragging at car shows about horsepower figures while conveniently ignoring the fact that they trailer the car everywhere because it's too unreliable to actually drive. It's a museum piece, a fossil from a time when automakers confused bigger with better. Modern cars with half the engine size can outrun it, outcorner it, and actually stop safely without giving the driver a heart attack. But muscle car nostalgia is a powerful drug, and so the myth lives on. The reality? The 1970 Chevelle SS454 wasn't a king. It was a bloated pretender sitting on a throne of rust, broken trim, and gas receipts. It guzzled fuel, rattled apart, and aged poorly. People remember it as a legend, but the people who actually owned one often remember it as a nightmare. A car for burnouts and bragging, not for living with. Call it king of the streets if you want, but every king eventually gets dethroned, and this one collapsed under its own weight.
The 1965 Pontiac GTO is often glorified in car history books as the first true muscle car, the one that supposedly started it all. Enthusiasts speak its name like it's sacred scripture, but take away the nostalgia, and what are you really left with? A mid-size Pontiac Tempest hastily stuffed with a big V8 and marketed with more hype than substance. People like to imagine it as some kind of engineering breakthrough, but in reality, it was just clever marketing wrapped around a heavy, clumsy car that handled with all the finesse of a drunk cow on roller skates. Pontiac didn't invent performance with the GTO, they invented a sales gimmick. By taking the pedestrian Le Mans Tempest platform and dropping in a 389 cubic inch V8, Pontiac's engineers basically found a loophole around GM's corporate ban on putting big engines in smaller cars. That was less a stroke of genius and more a boardroom trick. What people now call revolutionary was little more than hot rodding at the factory level.
Slap on some badges, cook up a catchy Italian-inspired name, and suddenly buyers thought they were getting Ferrari firepower at Chevy prices. But in truth, the GTO wasn't exotic or refined. It was a lumbering, nose-heavy Detroit box that could sprint in a straight line, but tripped over itself at the first sign of a curve. Let's talk about weight. With its oversized V8 up front, the GTO carried more heft than most of its so-called competitors, which made it sluggish off the line unless you absolutely floored it. Even then, most of the sensation came from tire smoke rather than forward motion, because bias-ply tires of the day simply couldn't cope. The car lunged forward like a bull in a china shop, squealing and thrashing around while the driver held on for dear life. Fans call this excitement. Realistically, it was chaos. Cornering was a nightmare. The front end plowed like a farm tractor, the rear felt twitchy, and the body rolled so hard you wondered if the car might flip on itself. Owners who expected some kind of American sports car quickly realized they had bought a boat with a V8. The interior didn't help Pontiac's case. For all its hype, the GTO's cabin was straight out of GM's parts bin. Cheap plastics, imitation wood trim, and seats that felt like overstuffed park benches. It rattled from day one, and within a few years, squeaks and groans turned every drive into a symphony of complaints. Pontiac offered flashy extras like a rally gauge cluster or a hood tachometer, but they didn't change the fact that the car felt unfinished inside. Many buyers admitted later that the car's fit and finish was embarrassingly poor compared to European performance cars of the time. For a machine that claimed to be a Gran Turismo omologato, it felt more like generic tin ornament. And the brakes, if you can even call them that? The standard drum brakes faded under pressure so badly that stopping from highway speeds was more like praying than driving. Even journalists in 1965 criticized how dangerous it felt to bring the GTO to a halt. Pontiac sold speed, but forgot about safety, a theme that would haunt American muscle cars for years to come. The suspension wasn't much better either. Soft springs meant it wallowed like a barge, making the car feel unstable at anything above 70 miles per hour. On paper, the GTO was quick. In practice, it was like wrestling a walrus every time you pushed it. Even the vaunted engine wasn't all that great in reality. Yes, 360 horsepower sounded impressive in the brochures, but Pontiac was playing fast and loose with their marketing. Real-world numbers varied wildly, and the car's heavy body soaked up much of the power. Plenty of owners admitted they lost stoplight drag races to lighter, cheaper cars, Chevy Novas, Ford Fairlines, even the occasional Mustang, because the GTO simply couldn't put its power down efficiently. What was supposed to be a street dominator often ended up being humiliated by smaller, better balanced machines. The worst part? Reliability. Owners discovered that the big 389 loved to drink fuel and oil in equal measure. Carburetors went out of tune constantly, gaskets leaked, and the car ran hot on summer days. Add in Pontiac's typical rust issues, fenders dissolving in a few short winters, floor pans giving way, and you had a car that aged faster than milk in the sun. By the early 1970s, used GTOs were already being junked because fixing them cost more than they were worth. The so-called legend barely survived its own decade without rotting into the ground. And yet here we are, decades later, with collectors and enthusiasts praising the 1965 GTO as if it's some holy relic. They don't remember the rattles, the lousy brakes, or the way it cornered like a drunken farm animal. They remember the marketing. They remember the hype. They remember the myth. It wasn't the first muscle car. It was the first scam dressed up as a muscle car, a flashy package meant to trick buyers into thinking they were getting more than a rebodied Tempest with a big carburetor. The reality is simple. The 1965 Pontiac GTO didn't earn its fame through excellence. It earned it through smoke, mirrors, and marketing. It was heavy, clumsy, cheaply built, and dangerously underbraked. People like to claim it was the start of a golden era, but in truth, it was the start of Detroit's greatest con job, convincing buyers that brute force and chrome badges equaled performance. A revolution? No, just the first snake oil muscle car, and people bought them by the thousands.
The 1963 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray is lauded as a design masterpiece, an icon of American sports car ingenuity, and a symbol of the youthful exuberance of the early 60s. Magazines gush over its lines, collectors swoon over its split rear window, and Hollywood has immortalized it in every car montage imaginable. But remove the hype, peel away the gloss, and what remains is a far cry from the perfection everyone claims to worship. Up close, this car looks less like a predator of the asphalt and more like a fish caught in a microwave. Its fiberglass body warped into sharp angles and curves that are more awkward than elegant. What enthusiasts call timeless design is often in reality a brittle, fragile shell that practically begs to crack under stress or carelessness. The Corvette Stingray may photograph beautifully, but as a tangible object, it's surprisingly fragile and fussy. Sitting inside is no relief. The cabin is a cramped, uncomfortable box, a test of endurance for anyone over 6 feet tall. The seats, often lauded as sporty, are narrow, firm, and unforgiving, essentially making the driver and passenger willing participants in a prolonged form of torture. The interior trim, plastic, vinyl, and faux wood, is cheap and prone to warping, cracking, and rattling almost immediately. Road noise is relentless. The chassis transmits every bump and crack, and the split rear window reduces visibility to near nil. Unlike European sports cars of the era, which combined some semblance of comfort with performance, the Corvette offers neither. Long drives are a battle of wills, and even short trips feel like a trial in discomfort management. Mechanically, the car is almost comically high maintenance. Early Stingrays are notorious for leaking oil, fuel, and sometimes coolant. The engine bay is a compact, awkward space that makes even routine maintenance a chore, and components are prone to failure. Gaskets, hoses, carburetors, and electrical wiring all conspire to create a constant headache for owners. For a car that cost a fortune in its day, it is astonishing how little reliability one actually receives in return. The temptation to drive it sparingly is strong, yet the Corvette's beauty seems to demand attention, leaving owners trapped in a cycle of obsessive care, frequent repairs, and escalating frustration. Driving the Corvette is an experience more terrifying than thrilling. Its lightweight fiberglass body paired with a stiff suspension makes the ride harsh, tail-happy, and twitchy. The steering is unassisted, brakes are drum units prone to fade, and cornering requires extreme focus to prevent the rear from swinging out. The car may promise exhilaration, but it delivers it in terrifying doses. The sting in Stingray seems more appropriate for the bite of regret one feels each time they realize just how difficult it is to keep this car on the road safely. Owners in the 1960s frequently described the experience as a combination of joy and anxiety, with a very thin line separating exhilaration from disaster. Stylistically, the Corvette's most celebrated feature, the split rear window, is also its worst practical flaw. Visibility is severely compromised, making parking and reversing exercises in pure frustration. The long, low nose and sweeping tail, while gorgeous in photographs, exacerbate this problem, turning simple maneuvers into nerve-wracking affairs.
Furthermore, the sharp edges and thin fiberglass make the car extremely susceptible to damage, and even minor bumps can lead to cracked panels or damaged trim. Restoration is almost a necessity for anyone hoping to enjoy the car without constant cosmetic anxiety. Fuel consumption is another unforgiving reality. Even the smallest V8s guzzle gasoline like a thirsty horse, and more powerful versions turn every drive into a wallet-draining affair. While magazines of the time celebrated the car's performance metrics, few emphasized that keeping a Stingray on the road was an expensive, time-consuming endeavor. Its allure is visual and visceral, but the practicalities of ownership, the constant maintenance, the uncomfortable ride, the leaky fluids, the nerve-wracking handling often outweigh the fleeting thrills. And yet, despite every flaw, the Corvette Stingray continues to be idolized. Collectors obsess over numbers matching, paint schemes, and chrome polish, all the while ignoring the daily realities that would have frustrated any ordinary owner. The car's legend is upheld by nostalgia and myth rather than its actual driving experience. Owning one is less a joyride and more a prolonged exercise in frustration management. You pay a premium to have a vehicle that looks magnificent but demands constant attention and patience.
The 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner is often remembered fondly in muscle car lore, but behind the cartoonish decals and the marketing slogans lies a car that, in reality, is far less heroic than its legend suggests. Its name promises speed, agility, and excitement, yet the reality of driving one reveals a car that is loud, clumsy, and fundamentally chaotic. The Roadrunner screams like a V8-powered banshee, its engine growling and spitting exhaust as if to impress, yet the acceleration, while respectable on paper, often feels uneven, jarring, and rough around the edges. The suspension, designed more for straight-line drag than cornering finesse, flops over bumps like a wooden puppet with loose joints. The chassis lumbers, the steering is vague, and the body rolls so dramatically that you can almost feel the steel frame groaning under stress. Every attempt at performance driving becomes a precarious balancing act, a reminder that the cartoon name is perhaps more accurate than Plymouth realized. This car is fast in theory, funny in practice, and terrifying if you dare to push it. Step inside, and the illusion of sophistication evaporates entirely. The cabin is a marvel of cost-cutting ingenuity, featuring hard, unforgiving plastics, vinyl seats that feel like park benches, and trim that rattles violently at every minor road imperfection. Door panels squeak, dashboard components wiggle, and every bump produces a chorus of rattles that make the car feel perpetually on the verge of collapse. Comfort is non-existent. Even short drives feel like endurance tests. Long trips are out of the question, unless you enjoy aching backs, numbed legs, and the constant soundtrack of squeaks and groans that accompany every motion of the car. Any hope of refinement, luxury, or quiet enjoyment is instantly dashed by the Roadrunner's bare-bones approach to interior design. The mechanical reality mirrors the interior's mediocrity. While the Roadrunner was marketed as a budget muscle car capable of thrilling performance, in practice it is a maintenance nightmare. Panels misalign, doors sag, and minor imperfections multiply into chronic annoyances. Engines, while theoretically potent, are prone to temperamental behavior with carburetors, gaskets, and fuel systems that demand constant attention. Owners often find themselves wrestling with oil leaks, drips, and puddles alongside a drivetrain that is as loud as it is demanding. Where enthusiasts see raw power, the everyday driver experiences unpredictability, mechanical fragility, and the constant threat of minor disasters. Reliability is sacrificed on the altar of marketing spectacle. Handling is another sore point. The Roadrunner's suspension, soft and imprecise, combined with vague steering and underwhelming brakes, ensures that cornering is a white-knuckle experience. The car leans dramatically, the rear end sways, and traction is never fully assured, particularly in wet or uneven conditions.
Any attempt at spirited driving transforms into a nerve-wracking exercise in control, demanding constant vigilance to keep the car on the road. The exaggerated body roll coupled with tire limitations of the era makes the Roadrunner far more of a comedy of errors than a cornering champion. Its famed horn may shout beep beep, but every twist and turn in the driver's seat whispers cheap cheap, a more fitting epithet for the shoddily executed package. Even the much-lauded engines like the 383 or 426 Hemi cannot entirely redeem the car. While the V8s provide raw sound and some straight-line capability, the Roadrunner's frame, suspension, and tires are ill-suited to harness their potential. What should feel like raw, controlled power instead feels like a wild animal barely contained, with wheel spin, exaggerated body roll, and unpredictable handling turning every run into a precarious adventure. On the streets, the car delivers chaos rather than precision, style over substance, and spectacle rather than reliability. The interior and mechanical failings are compounded by the car's finish and build quality. Panels that should align wobble, seams gape, and minor road hazards produce rattles, clunks, and squeaks that seem to mock the driver. The exterior, while flashy and cartoonish in appearance, does little to disguise the thin steel, cheap trim, and lightweight construction underneath. The Roadrunner is a car built to impress from a distance, but crumble under scrutiny. A vehicle designed to wow spectators while tormenting the driver. Every parking maneuver, every sharp turn, every speed bump becomes a reminder that the car's reputation vastly exceeds its practical performance. Even after decades, the legend persists. Collectors fawn over badges, decals, and engine options, while conveniently forgetting the daily frustrations, the rattles, the maintenance, and the constant state of mechanical anxiety the car imposed on its owners. Nostalgia glosses over the reality of the car's faults, transforming it into an icon of an era rather than the flawed, loud, and clumsy machine that it truly is. The Plymouth Roadrunner may have captured imaginations and inspired dreams of raw American muscle, but in practice, it delivers more headaches than thrills, more noise than precision, and more regret than glory. In conclusion, the 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner is a car built on hype, marketing, and cartoon-inspired fantasy. It is loud, rattly, under-refined, and mechanically fussy, with interior and exterior flaws that make even simple driving an ordeal. The thrill promised by its big V8s is undercut by poor handling, flimsy suspension, and a chassis that is constantly reminding the driver of its limitations. What is remembered as an icon of muscle car history is, for anyone who actually owned one, a loud, frustrating, and unpredictable mess where every squeak, rattle, and minor failure underlines the reality that the car was a showpiece first and a vehicle second. Beep beep, more like cheap cheap. If you want, I can now expand this into an epic, multi-page owner diary-style rant written as if someone bought a 1969 Roadrunner new and is cataloging every single day of frustration, rattles, squeaks, oil leaks, sketchy handling, and mechanical headaches in real-time diary entries. This could make it 3 to 4 times longer than the current description. Do you want me to do that?
The 1970 Dodge Challenger RT is often remembered in classic car circles as a muscle car icon, supposedly a direct rival to the Mustang and Camaro. Yet, a closer look at reality reveals a vehicle that is far more bloated and cumbersome than the marketing hype suggests. Its visual presence is overwhelming, but not in a good way. The long, flat hood stretches like an endless slab of steel. The boxy body panels sag with a sense of gravity that feels almost comical, and the oversized rear deck makes the car resemble a lumbering padded brick more than a predator of the asphalt. Dodge clearly aimed to impress with sheer size and bravado, but they sacrifice proportion, balance, and agility in the process. From some angles, it seems to droop under its own bulk, like someone tried to weld a sofa to a set of wheels and called it a performance car. The exaggerated front grille, high beltline, and slab-sided panels may turn heads in a parking lot, but they do little to hint at any kind of refined driving experience. Step inside, and the illusion of sophistication evaporates completely. The cabin, while spacious, offers comfort only in theory. The seats are stiff, flat, and barely supportive, leaving long trips a test of endurance for your back and legs. The dashboard is sprawling but uninspired, a collection of plastic panels, knobs, and gauges that feel cheaply assembled. And every imperfection in the road reverberates loudly throughout the cabin. Road noise, engine roar, and chassis flex combine to create a constant cacophony, turning what should be a thrilling drive into an exhausting, teeth-gritting experience. The soft-touch materials are nearly non-existent, and trim pieces are prone to rattling and loosening with age, making the car feel perpetually unfinished and fragile. In short, the interior does little to justify the car's hefty price tag, instead serving as a constant reminder that the Dodge Challenger RT's glamour was mostly skim deep. Driving the Challenger RT is where the fantasy truly collides with reality. The RT badge implies performance, but the car's massive size and weight make it feel more like piloting a sofa than commanding a muscle car. Steering is heavy, vague, and slow to respond, demanding continuous effort and attention to keep the front end where you want it. The suspension, while soft enough to absorb some road imperfections, wallows excessively in corners, creating dramatic body roll and unsettling tail behavior. Acceleration, though brutal in theory thanks to big block engines like the 383, 440, or 426 Hemi, is often undermined by the car's lumbering frame, soft tires, and imprecise handling. Instead of a controlled surge of power, drivers experience a heaving, lurching motion that feels unpredictable and at times unsafe. Attempting spirited driving becomes a nerve-wracking exercise in concentration, and the thrill promised by the RT label is frequently replaced by anxiety over the car's massive bulk and tendency to overstep its own capabilities. Mechanically, the Challenger is no friend to its owner. The suspension, brakes, and drivetrain were all designed with straight-line performance in mind, leaving daily driving and long trips as tests of patience. Drum brakes fade quickly under repeated stops. The soft suspension wallows relentlessly over uneven pavement, and the large engine bay is cramped and difficult to service. Owners historically reported minor but persistent annoyances, oil leaks, fuel line issues, misaligned panels, and rattling interior components that demanded constant attention. Reliability, as in many Detroit muscle cars of the era, was sacrificed for spectacle and engine size, meaning that every drive required vigilance, and every maintenance session required perseverance and ingenuity. For a car built to be bold and aggressive, it often leaves the driver exhausted before reaching any destination. Even the styling, praised for its aggression and presence, comes with practical downsides. The long hood and high belt line reduce visibility, making parking and maneuvering cumbersome. The massive size makes tight corners, urban streets, and narrow driveways a constant challenge. Body panels flex under stress, creating rattles and squeaks that remind the driver that the car is, in many ways, a fragile sculpture rather than a robust performance machine. While Dodge succeeded in crafting a vehicle that commands attention at first glance, they failed to create one that delivers proportion, poise, or refinement behind the wheel. The Challenger RT is a car that impresses from a distance and frustrates up close. Even the celebrated engine options cannot fully redeem the car. While the V8s provide raw sound and straight-line power, much of that potential is wasted due to soft suspension, vague steering, and primitive tires. Wheel spin, exaggerated body roll, and inconsistent traction reduce acceleration to a chaotic, uncontrolled lunge, transforming what should feel like mastery over brute force into a wrestling match with your own car. The sensation behind the wheel is often one of constant vigilance, bracing for the next moment when the car's bulk and imperfections will assert themselves. Instead of smooth power delivery, the Challenger RT delivers shocks, jolts, and the ever-present awareness that you are commanding a machine far larger and heavier than it should be. Ultimately, the 1970 Dodge Challenger RT is less a rival to the Mustang than a case-and-muscle car excess. Oversized, underbuilt, and overhyped, it's a car that promises excitement, aggression, and performance, yet delivers bulk, awkward handling, rattles, and constant maintenance headaches. It is the automotive equivalent of a bloated movie sequel nobody asked for, visually striking, but fundamentally flawed. The legend of the Challenger obscures the reality. It is a sofa on wheels, a lumbering brick masquerading as a muscle car, and a reminder that spectacle often trumps substance in the heyday of American horsepower. Dodge succeeded in crafting a car that turns heads, but they failed to create one that satisfies in everyday use. Its RT badge might stand for road or track, but the true meaning could just as easily be rattles and troubles. If you want, I can now expand this further into a full page-by-page owner nightmare diary, chronicling months of ownership with the 1970 Challenger RT, rattles, leaks, awkward handling, suspension wallows, engine quirks, and every daily annoyance, turning it into an extremely long, bitterly humorous, and brutally detailed account. This could easily triple the current length. Do you want me to do that?
The 1966 Shelby GT350 is hailed as a performance legend, a mythical Mustang transformed into a racing-ready machine by the genius of Carroll Shelby. Or so the story goes. In reality, this car is far closer to a glorified Mustang with a fancy badge, a few stripes, and a pricier sticker than the masterpiece legend would have you believe. Peel back the hype, and you find a vehicle that rattles, shakes, and shimmies at every bump, squeaks in corners, and vibrates like a jackhammer on asphalt. What enthusiasts call character can just as easily be described as relentless irritation. Every creak of the bodywork, every shimmy of the steering column, every vibration from the chassis serves as a constant reminder that comfort and refinement were almost entirely sacrificed on the altar of marketing. The interior, slightly upgraded over a base Mustang, is no oasis of luxury. Hard, thinly padded seats, rattly dash panels, and crude switches make every drive an endurance test. Even short trips feel like punishment as the cabin amplifies every road imperfection and engine thrum into a sensory assault. The engine, often praised for its raw power, does deliver a noticeable kick compared to a standard Mustang. But in practice, that performance is rough and unrefined. The V8 growls and coughs its way through the gears, producing more noise than smooth acceleration. The chassis, though reinforced, struggles to handle the extra horsepower, leaving steering heavy and imprecise, brakes inconsistent, and the suspension unforgivingly stiff. Every turn and corner becomes a high-stakes negotiation with physics. The car leans, wobbles, and threatens to upset even the most cautious driver. It is a machine that promises adrenaline, but delivers it with a side of terror, discomfort, and unpredictability. Enthusiasts romanticize the raw, unfiltered driving experience, but to the average driver, it feels like wrestling a metal beast that wants to remind you constantly of its fragility. Mechanically, the GT350 is a maintenance headache. The upgrades that supposedly enhance performance, suspension tweaks, engine modifications, and unique bodywork also introduce quirks and potential points of failure. Oil leaks, misfires, carburetor issues, and rattling body panels are common complaints, and the car demands constant attention to keep it on the road. Reliability is not a selling point. Rather, the thrill comes at the price of persistent upkeep and near-daily vigilance. Every drive is a gamble. Will the car roar beautifully today, or will it cough, squeal, and rattle its way through a series of minor but infuriating malfunctions? The reality of ownership is a mixture of awe-inspiring noise, frequent aggravation, and the knowledge that beneath all the hype, the car is essentially a Mustang with a veneer of Shelby mystique. Stylistically, the GT350 is a paradox. From a distance, it embodies aggression, performance, and American muscle. The racing stripes, aggressive nose, and slightly flared fenders suggest speed even when stationary. Up close, however, the illusion falters. Thin panels flex under minimal pressure, gaps between trim pieces are pronounced, and the overall finish feels brittle and delicate. The split between visual appeal and functional excellence is stark. It may look fast, but the drive proves that what you see is often odds with what you feel. The interior offers little solace, the suspension punishes the spine, and the engine's roar is often more alarming than exhilarating. The car is a study in contradictions, beautiful to look at, harsh to touch, thrilling in theory, exhausting in practice. Ownership is a relentless combination of excitement and frustration. Every morning brings the anxiety of checking oil levels, brake function, and suspension integrity before daring to drive. Every ride exposes the rickety cabin, rattling panels, and stiff, unforgiving seats. Every corner tests the limits of control, every acceleration challenges the chassis, and every bump reminds the driver that they are piloting a glorified Mustang with a Shelby badge.
The experience can be thrilling for those seeking rawness and drama, but for anyone hoping for refined, usable performance, it is a constant series of compromises and irritations. Ultimately, the 1966 Shelby GT350 is less a masterpiece than a myth sustained by nostalgia, marketing, and legend. It is rattly, uncomfortable, temperamental, and often terrifying behind the wheel. While it may impress at car shows or in photographs, the reality of daily ownership is a near constant trial of patience, endurance, and mechanical problem-solving. Every vibration, squeak, and jolt reminds the driver that this is not perfection. It is a loud, aggressive, and flawed Mustang masquerading as a performance icon. Carroll Shelby's so-called masterpiece is more accurately described as a noisy, high-maintenance exercise in style over substance. Shelby, more like shabby.
The 1969 Camaro Z28 is a car that has been elevated to near mythical status in the annals of American muscle cars, often portrayed as a lean, mean, track-ready machine capable of taking on Mustangs, Barracudas, and nearly anything else on four wheels. In truth, the Z28's reality is far less glamorous, revealing a muscle car that is loud, heavy, underwhelming in handling, and exhausting to drive for more than a few minutes. Its very design, which looks aggressive on paper and in magazine spreads, is compromised by proportions that scream bulk over precision. The long hood stretches uncomfortably forward, while the short rear deck and boxy side profile create a top-heavy, almost lopsided impression. The car seems designed to impress from a distance, but the closer you get, the more its flaws become glaring. Panel gaps, thin sheet metal, and a cabin that rattles and resonates with the tiniest imperfection in the road. The Z28 is, in many ways, a visual promise of performance that its chassis and mechanicals struggle to keep. Step inside, and the illusion of sophistication shatters completely. The interior is minimalistic and, in many ways, unforgiving. The seats, while sporting a slightly higher level of padding than the base Camaro, are still firm, thin, and lack lateral support, making spirited driving feel like a wrestling match against the car's own body. Dash materials are sparse, switches feel crude, and every vibration from the road, suspension, or drivetrain is transmitted unabated into the cabin. Long drives are less pleasurable journeys and more endurance tests for both driver and passenger, as the combination of stiff suspension, rattling panels, and unrefined ergonomics conspires to fatigue anyone inside. The cabin noise alone, engine roar, wind intrusion, road hum, and body squeaks create almost a constant assault on the senses, undermining any notion of refined performance. Driving the Z28 is a study in contradictions and frustrations. The car's small block 302 V8 produces respectable horsepower on paper, but in the context of the heavy, undersprung chassis, the engine often feels mismatched. Acceleration isn't smooth. It's a series of lurches punctuated by the tires struggling for grip and the suspension flexing excessively under load. Steering is heavy and imprecise, offering little feedback, and the car responds to cornering with a slow, exaggerated body roll that demands constant correction from the driver. The suspension, while technically upgraded compared to standard Camaros, remains harsh and poorly damped, transmitting every imperfection from asphalt cracks, potholes, and uneven surfaces directly into the steering wheel and seats. On a twisty road, the car's limits are clear, and every turn becomes a nerve-wracking negotiation with physics. Enthusiasts glorify the raw driving experience, but in practice it is exhausting, unpredictable, and often mildly terrifying. The braking system is another sore point. Despite the performance-oriented marketing, the brakes on most Z28s fade alarmingly fast. Drum brakes, standard on many models, struggle to handle spirited driving. Even upgraded front discs are marginal by modern standards. Modulation is poor, bite is inconsistent, and long downhill runs or repeated hard braking can quickly erode confidence. A track day fantasy becomes a lesson in humility, as the car's stopping power is often insufficient to match its straight-line thrust. This mismatch between advertised performance and real-world capability is a recurring theme. The Z28 is louder than it is fast, brash in appearance, yet delicate in execution,
and thrilling in theory, but exhausting in reality. Mechanically, the Z28 is prone to the usual quirks of late 1960s Detroit muscle cars. Carburetors require constant tuning, electrical systems are temperamental, suspension bushings wear quickly, and minor oil leaks are par for the course. Owners quickly learn that keeping the car running smoothly requires vigilance, patience, and a willingness to engage in near-constant maintenance. The performance upgrades that supposedly distinguish the Z28 from base Camaros also increase the potential for breakdowns and malfunctions. What should feel like a high-performance thrill ride often devolves into a game of damage control, as the driver constantly manages rattles, vibrations, and mechanical idiosyncrasies. Even the styling, which is often praised as classic and aggressive, comes with caveats. The car's lines may look sporty in photos, but in the real world its boxy, heavy proportions undermine that perception. The long, flat hood dominates the front end, creating visual balance issues, while the squared-off rear and narrow greenhouse add to a sense of ungainly bulk. From close angles, it appears less a track-focused machine and more a visually loud, lumbering compromise between style and substance. In short, the 1969 Camaro Z28 is a muscle car wrapped in legend, but when evaluated on real-world performance and usability, it is less a race-bred weapon and more a loud, uncomfortable, and occasionally frustrating exercise in overhyped ambition. Its suspension wallows, brakes fade, engine is coarse, and handling is unpredictable, leaving drivers constantly negotiating with a machine that looks more capable than it truly is. Even its supposed visual appeal is offset by its ungainly proportions, rattly cabin, and top-heavy stance. The badge promises adrenaline, dominance, and muscle car glory, but behind the wheel, the reality is closer to ZZZ, a car that is exhausting, rattly, and far less competent than its cult status would suggest. The 1969 Z28 is in many ways a prime example of muscle car excess. All spectacle, minimal refinement, and performance often compromised by its own bulk and outdated technology. Fans may worship it, but owners endure rattles, hard seats, fade-prone brakes, nervous handling, and a constant reminder that appearances and legend are not the same as engineering excellence. Z28? More like ZZZ. If you like, I can now expand this into an ultra-long, multi-month owner horror diary, chronicling day-to-day life with a 1969 Camaro Z28. Brake fade, rattles, suspension wallows, engine quirks, oil leaks, steering vagueness, and every frustrating detail, turning it into an extremely long, brutally scathing narrative. Do you want me to do that?
The 1970 Buick GSX is often celebrated in muscle car circles as a sleeper, a big block powerhouse disguised under a seemingly sedate Buick body. But the truth is far less glamorous than the legend suggests. This is not a stealthy assassin lurking on the asphalt. It's a lumbering, bloated beast that feels like someone strapped a V8 to a sofa and told it to go fast. At first glance, the car's bold paint, racing stripes, and GSX badging promise performance and dominance. In reality, those visual cues are little more than a neon sign advertising the car's attempt at street cred, while masking its lethargic and unwieldy nature. The GSX looks aggressive from afar, but up close, every line, curve, and proportion scream overbuilt and underwhelming. Its long, heavy hood and massive wheelbase make it top-heavy, and any attempt at spirited cornering reveals the brutal truth. The GSX is a boat with a V8 strapped on top, prone to dramatic body roll and hesitant responses to driver input. Step inside, and the illusion of performance continues to unravel. The cabin is roomy, yes, but it feels more like the interior of a 1970s living room than a muscle car cockpit. Plush seats offer comfort, but at the cost of lateral support. During turns, you slide and shift like a passenger on a slow-moving carnival ride. The dashboard is wide but uninspired, the steering heavy and imprecise, and the pedals uncommunicative, leaving the driver feeling disconnected from the car's supposed capabilities. Noise is relentless. The big block V8 thrums, the suspension creaks, and the body flexes audibly with every bump.
reminding you constantly that this is not a precision machine, but a hulking, vibrating mechanical brute. The so-called sleeper aspect is laughable. Yes, the car might surprise someone on a drag strip thanks to raw torque, but everyday driving is a test of patience, nerve, and tolerance for rattles, vibrations, and clumsy steering. Mechanically, the GSX is both straightforward and frustrating. The big block V8 delivers torque, but the car's weight and soft suspension sap any sense of agility. Acceleration exists, but it's more of a lumbering shove than a crisp launch. Brakes, adequate under gentle use, fade alarmingly during spirited runs, making the car feel even more ungainly and dangerous when pushed. The heavy, vague steering demands constant attention, and cornering remains a challenge as the car leans dramatically and the tires protest with every attempt to change direction. Suspension compliance, meant to provide a comfortable ride, amplifies the car's bulk, making it feel like you're trying to wrangle a sofa through a winding road. Maintenance is a chore. Engine components are bulky and awkwardly arranged, and working on the car's suspension or brakes requires dealing with its sheer size and weight, reminding owners that the GSX is as much a project as a performance vehicle. Even the car's styling, often praised for its boldness, is more of a visual distraction than a statement of capability. The long, flat hood, squared-off rear end, and high beltline create a top-heavy, blocky appearance. The bright yellow paint and stripes may draw attention at car shows, but they cannot disguise the fact that the GSX is fundamentally ungainly. It's a car that promises aggression and excitement, but delivers a driving experience dominated by mass, inertia, and unpredictability. The so-called sleeper reputation is ironic. You might surprise someone in a straight line, but the sheer effort required to drive it safely and competently on normal roads exposes its limitations. Driving the GSX is a lesson in contradiction. It is a car that boasts performance on paper, but struggles to deliver in practice. Its acceleration, while respectable, is tempered by heavy body weight. Its handling, while promoted as sporty, is compromised by dramatic body roll and soft suspension. Its braking, while technically sufficient, quickly fades when demanded. Long trips fatigue both driver and passenger due to the car's relentless vibrations, rattles, and the disconnect between driver input and vehicle response. Ownership is an exercise in vigilance. Checking brakes, steering, and suspension is routine, and every spirited drive becomes a negotiation with physics, mass, and the car's inherent bulk. Ultimately, the 1970 Buick GSX is less a legendary muscle car and more a testament to American excess and overconfidence. It is bulky, uncomfortable, rattly, and top-heavy, with styling that masks more than it reveals. Its performance exists, but it is filtered through a car so heavy, soft, and awkward that thrills are muted, control is compromised, and the driving experience is exhausting. Even its famed engine, capable on paper, feels like it is laboring under the weight of a sofa with racing stripes. The GSX promises adrenaline and street dominance, but delivers instead a lumbering, noisy, and frustratingly awkward ride that will test the patience of even the most enthusiastic driver. Bright paint and aggressive badges do little to change the truth. This sleeper muscle car is better described as a heavy, loud, and clumsy cruiser in the guise of performance. Yellow paint or not, it's a car that puts people to sleep as surely as it moves down the road. Overhyped, overbuilt, and underwhelming. If you want, I can now expand this into a massive day-by-day owner horror diary chronicling months of driving a 1970 Buick GSX, rattles, body roll, brake fade, engine quirks, suspension wallows and steering frustration, and all the little disasters that make it the ultimate sleeper in name only. This could easily be 4 to 5 times longer than this entry, brutally detailed and humorously scathing. Do you want me to do that?
The 1964 Ford GT40 is often venerated as a holy relic of American automotive ambition, the car that finally toppled Ferrari at Le Mans and carved the Ford name into racing history. But strip away the legend, and what you're left with is a vehicle that feels less like a car and more like an exercise in endurance, discomfort, and raw intimidation. Sitting in the cockpit is like entering a tiny metal coffin.
The cabin is impossibly tight, with your legs crammed against the bulkhead and knees pressed uncomfortably against the dash. The steering wheel feels distant yet twitchy. The pedals require brute force to operate, and the seats, if you can call them that, offer just enough padding to remind you that comfort was not part of the design brief. Every surface radiates heat from the mid-mounted V8 behind you, turning the cabin into a portable oven. On a sunny day, temperatures inside climb to levels that feel almost dangerous. Even brief drives are drenched in sweat, and the combination of heat and tight confines quickly saps any remaining sense of enjoyment. The controls are brutal. The gearbox is unforgiving, a metal-on-metal ballet of precision and pain that punishes even the most careful driver. Miss a shift, and the transmission grinds mercilessly, while the clutch is heavy, long-traveling, and physically demanding. Steering is unassisted and sharp, transmitting every bump, ripple, and ripple-induced jolt into your hands with alarming clarity. The suspension, tuned for smooth race circuits, mercilessly rejects city streets, sending every crack, pothole, and uneven patch violently through the chassis. On ordinary roads, driving a GT40 becomes an ordeal of concentration, physical endurance, and constant correction. Any momentary lapse risks scraping the chassis, losing control, or simply enduring a jolt so severe it leaves your body aching. Visibility is almost non-existent. The low-slung body, tiny windscreen, and low seating position combine to make street driving a hazard game. Merging into traffic, spotting pedestrians, and negotiating intersections require exaggerated head movements and constant vigilance. Side mirrors are minimal and inadequate. Rear visibility is effectively zero, and the rear engine cover is a heat-radiating bulk that fills the back of your peripheral vision. Parking, turning, or even navigating modest city streets is a lesson in patience, luck, and humility. Driving this car in anything but a closed circuit is an adventure in stress, discomfort, and mild terror. Mechanically, the GT40 is a paradox. The V8 engine produces astonishing power, but in a car that's unforgiving to drive, it feels both overwhelming and delicate. Oil leaks, overheating, and brake fade are not anomalies, they're predictable companions. Even routine maintenance is a chore, with the cramped engine bay, tight access points, and delicate race-spec components demanding constant attention. The brakes, while capable on smooth tracks, heat up and fade quickly, making sudden stops a gamble. Tires wear rapidly under the car's power, and the suspension components, designed for smooth tracks, are stressed by any bump or imperfection, leading to a maintenance nightmare. Owning a GT40 is not just about driving. It is about constant vigilance, hands-on care, and a willingness to endure near-constant mechanical anxiety. The car's exterior, often celebrated for its sleek aerodynamics and low-profile aggression, comes with equally impractical consequences. The GT40 scrapes driveways, parking lot ramps, and steep inclines with alarming regularity. Entering and exiting the cockpit requires acrobatics. You must twist, contort, and slide into the metal tube, a process that leaves you sore long before the engine fires. The lightweight panels, designed for racing efficiency, are delicate and unforgiving. One careless touch can dent or scratch metal that is both hard to replace and conspicuously visible. The car looks menacing, purposeful, and fast, but that appearance comes at the cost of every comfort, safety, and convenience a normal human expects from a car. Even the ride experience is a lesson in brutal honesty. On a track, the GT40 delivers thrills in a very specific context, but take it onto streets or roads with imperfections, and the illusion evaporates. The car rattles, shudders, and vibrates relentlessly. Acceleration is raw and untamed. Braking requires anticipation and skill. Steering demands constant focus. One wrong move can mean scraping the nose, bottoming out, or experiencing a jolt that sends shockwaves through your body. Endurance driving becomes almost painful. And the reality is that this car was never intended for anyone but a professional racer or a billionaire executive seeking prestige. Comfort, practicality, and usability were irrelevant. In essence, the 1964 Ford GT40 is a marvel of engineering and a terror of practicality.
It is not a car for humans in any ordinary sense. It is a coffin, an oven, a relentless machine that prioritizes speed, ego, and racing glory over anything resembling comfort or usability. Its fame, deserved as it may be on the track, obscures the truth. The GT40 is oppressive, exhausting, and unforgiving. Every drive is a trial, every maneuver a potential hazard, and every road outside a track a source of stress. While it conquered Ferrari at Le Mans, the GT40 simultaneously crushes the ordinary driver under its relentless, uncompromising design. It is awe-inspiring from a distance, terrifying up close, and almost impossible to enjoy in normal life. In short, it is legendary for racing, but miserable for humans. A coffin with wheels, designed to dazzle, dominate, and discomfort in equal measure. If you want, I can now turn this into an ultra-epic, multi-thousand-word GT40 owner's nightmare diary, chronicling weeks or months of daily life with the car, cockpit hell, heat torture, gearbox brutality, handling terror, brake fade, scraping incidents, and mechanical quirks, creating a truly massive, brutally honest, and humorously scathing account. Do you want me to do that?
The 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30 is a car whose reputation has been inflated by marketing hype and nostalgic muscle car fever, because in reality, it is a lumbering, overstuffed, and thoroughly underwhelming vehicle. From the moment you approach it, the car promises aggression. A long, slab-sided body, squared-off proportions, bold stripes, and W30 badging that suggests performance, precision, and the thrill of the open road. Step closer, and the illusion begins to crumble. Its sheer bulk is immediately apparent. The hood stretches out like a runway, the rear overhang drags behind like a cumbersome tail, and every inch of the car screams weight. At nearly 2 tons, the 442 W30 is heavy, top-heavy, and ungainly, a far cry from the nimble, sharp, corner-carving muscle cars that enthusiasts imagine when they think of the golden era of American performance. Climb inside, and the cabin amplifies the car's contradictions. The seats are cushioned and soft, giving a false sense of comfort, but the interior ergonomics are poor, and the controls feel loose and disconnected. Visibility is restricted by thick pillars, a long hood, and a low seating position, turning every parking maneuver or city drive into a careful exercise in spatial awareness. The steering, though power-assisted, is slow to react and lacks feedback, making precise driving impossible. Braking is mediocre at best, and when you push the car even slightly, the soft suspension allows the body to roll and sway in a way that makes you feel as if you're piloting a semi rather than a muscle coupe. Every turn is an event, every corner a negotiation with gravity, mass, and physics, highlighting that the muscle in this car is less about responsiveness and more about sheer, awkward momentum. The drivetrain reinforces the illusion of performance while simultaneously betraying the driver. The big V8 produces torque, but that force is consumed by the car's enormous weight. Acceleration exists, yes, but it is slow, labored, and accompanied by body flex, wheel hop, and exhaust growls that sound more like a frustrated tractor than a precision racing machine. The transmission, while technically capable, is heavy and unrefined, making every gear change feel like a deliberate battle with mechanical resistance. The engine bay, though spacious, exposes the raw mechanical reality of the car. Hoses, cables, and components crowded in awkward arrangements, all requiring constant maintenance to prevent the inevitable minor failures that come from operating such a heavy, powerful machine. Driving the 442 W30 is an experience defined by compromise. On a long, straight road, you might feel a glimmer of the car's intended power, but even then, the suspension sags, the steering wanders, and the brakes hesitate. On twisty roads, the car becomes a lumbering beast. Body roll is exaggerated, weight transfer is slow and unsettling, and tires protest with squeals and chatter. Every adjustment requires overcompensation, and the car's bulk and soft suspension transform every corner into a trial of skill and patience. The ride is harsh when pushed, soft when cruising, and constantly unpredictable, making it impossible to extract any real precision or control from the machine. The interior, though plush, is not spared from the 442W30's shortcomings. Noise permeates the cabin. Engine vibrations, exhaust growl, and chassis creaks combine to create a relentless audio reminder that this is a brute of a car, not a refined instrument. Comfort is relative. Long drives fatigue both driver and passenger, and the illusion of luxury is stripped away by the constant reminder that the car was built for spectacle and marketing, not for ergonomic pleasure or enjoyable driving. Every journey reinforces the disconnect between the car's muscular appearance and its awkward, unrefined reality. Even the car's styling, often cited as aggressive and purposeful, betrays its lack of practicality. The long hood and squared-off rear, while visually striking, contribute to the car's top-heavy feel and poor weight distribution. Parking and maneuvering are tedious. Driveway ramps, curbs, and uneven asphalt are constant threats to the low-slung body. The bright colors and stripes may catch the eye, but they cannot mask the vehicle's fundamental flaws: heavy mass, sluggish handling, and a lack of driver feedback. The 442W30 is visually assertive, but mechanically timid, leaving the driver in a constant tug-of-war between expectation and reality. Mechanically, the car is straightforward but heavy-handed. Its power is real but poorly harnessed, its suspension designed for comfort but ill-suited to performance, and its steering and brakes adequate but unresponsive. Maintenance, while not exotic, is a constant reminder of the car's size and weight. Components are large, awkward, and difficult to access, and minor repairs are laborious due to the vehicle's bulk. Reliability is adequate, but anything beyond gentle driving quickly exposes the car's limits, whether through brake fade, suspension flex, or engine strain. The 442W30 is not a car built for finesse. It is a machine designed for straight-line spectacle and visual impact, leaving the driver with a constant reality of compromise. Ultimately, the 1970 Oldsmobile 442W30 is a masterclass in overstatement. Its name promises speed, aggression, and excitement, but the actual driving experience is dominated by weight, inertia, soft handling, and frustration. Acceleration exists, yes, but it is labored. Steering exists, but it is vague. Brakes exist, but they fade easily. And comfort exists, but only superficially. The W30 is a car that looks fast, feels heavy, and drives like a compromise between spectacle and functionality. The 442 may sound thrilling, but in practice it stands for 4 tires, 4 seats, and 2 tons of mass that require patience, endurance, and a strong sense of irony. In the end, the 442W30 is less a celebrated muscle car and more a reminder that American automakers often favored size, visual drama, and raw displacement over finesse, precision, or true driving pleasure. Bright paint, bold stripes, and W30 badging may catch the eye, but every mile behind the wheel reinforces a simple truth. This is a car designed to look fast, sound powerful, and feel intimidating. But it was never designed to be genuinely thrilling, responsive, or enjoyable. It is a hulking, noisy, and frustrating spectacle that earns its reputation through size and presence, not through any meaningful driver engagement. If you want, I can now expand this into a full-scale, multi-thousand-word daily ownership nightmare of the 1970 Oldsmobile 442W30, chronicling each aspect of its mass, handling quirks, engine behavior, suspension wallows, brake struggles, and every little annoyance in painfully detailed, humorously scathing fashion, making it one of the longest and most brutally honest entries ever written about a muscle car. Do you want me to do that?
The 1968 Mercury Cougar XR7 is often remembered with a smirk as the luxury Mustang, a clever marketing phrase that implies sophistication, style, and just enough muscle to satisfy enthusiasts. But in practice, the car is a master class in compromise gone wrong. Approach it expecting sharp handling and performance, and you're immediately disappointed. The body is bloated, heavy, and awkwardly proportioned, with a long hood that seems to drag along the front axle and a rear overhang that makes even gentle turns feel like steering a barge. Its suspension, soft and overly forgiving, allows the car to wallow and sway with every bump, creating a sensation akin to being on a floating platform rather than behind the wheel of a muscular coupe. Steering is light but imprecise, responding sluggishly and offering almost no feedback, leaving the driver to guess at the car's behavior through corners or in traffic. Every drive is a negotiation with inertia, body roll, and vague road feel. What should be fun is replaced by constant adjustment and a growing sense of frustration. Step inside, and the interior continues the charade. Mercury attempted luxury with plush bucket seats, vinyl, and faux wood accents, but the reality is underwhelming. The layout feels cluttered and cramped, visibility is limited by thick A-pillars and a swooping roofline, and the controls are vague, loose, and often placed inconveniently. Road vibrations, engine growl, and chassis rattles invade the cabin, turning what should be a refined experience into an auditory reminder of the car's compromises. Long drives are fatiguing, with the soft seats offering little support, and every cornering maneuver emphasizes how top-heavy, ungainly, and imprecise the XR7 really is. Even its so-called luxury appointments feel superficial, more cosmetic than functional, leaving the driver wondering why they didn't just stick with a Mustang or a true luxury sedan. Mechanically, the Cougar XR7 is sluggish and uninspiring. While it offered a range of V8 engines, the car's weight quickly saps any sense of urgency or excitement. Acceleration exists, but it is labored and accompanied by exaggerated body movement, vague steering feedback, and tires protesting even mild cornering. Brakes are adequate for casual driving, but fade quickly under spirited use, offering little confidence when it's actually needed. The soft suspension, intended to provide comfort, amplifies body roll and creates an unsettling, almost comical sense of momentum transfer. Power exists, but it is neither precise nor rewarding. Every maneuver is a reminder that this car was designed more for appearances than for driving enjoyment. From a styling perspective, the XR7 attempts to straddle sportiness and refinement, but achieves neither. The long, stretched body and swooping roofline give it presence, but also accentuates its awkward proportions. Hidden headlights, chrome trim, and subtle hood lines suggest aggression, yet the bulk and weight betray every claim of nimbleness or agility. Bright paint and badges may draw the eye, but the reality of piloting this car is fat, slow, and ungainly. Entering and exiting the cabin is awkward. The low roofline and bulky doors require contortions, reminding the driver that this car prioritizes style cues over practical comfort. Daily driving with the Cougar XR7 is a constant exercise in compromise. City streets are stressful, as the long hood and limited visibility make tight maneuvers challenging. Parking requires care and patience, while acceleration on open roads is a laborious, lurching affair. The suspension wallows, the brakes require anticipation, and the steering leaves the driver guessing at every correction. Noise, vibrations, and heat intrude relentlessly, emphasizing that this is a car designed to look the part, but not to deliver pleasure, precision, or confidence. Even as a luxury vehicle, the Cougar XR7's cabin is noisy, cramped, and ergonomically flawed. Soft seats may appear inviting, but lack lateral support, turning spirited cornering into an uncomfortable experience. Road and engine vibrations invade the cabin constantly, and the steering and suspension provide little reassurance or control. Features intended to enhance comfort are superficial, and the driving experience highlights the car's inherent contradictions. Soft and heavy, stylish but ungainly, powerful on paper but sluggish in practice.
Ultimately, the 1968 Mercury Cougar XR7 is a car defined by its compromises. Its luxury Mustang moniker is a marketing ploy, promising style, performance, and refinement, but in reality, delivering a soft, heavy, and sluggish vehicle that excels at looking impressive while failing at driving enjoyment. It's top-heavy, slow to respond, awkward around corners, and fatiguing on long drives. A car that seems to exist for appearances and dealer showroom appeal rather than for the pleasure of those behind the wheel. Its weight, mushy suspension, vague steering, sluggish acceleration, and brake fade all combine to create a driving experience that is more exhausting than exhilarating, more frustrating than fun. Mercury may have tried to make a luxurious alternative to the Mustang, but the XR7 ends up as the Mustang's bloated, sluggish, and forgettable cousin, a car that impresses in pictures and badging, but punishes in reality. It is soft where it should be sharp, heavy where it should be nimble, and visually ambitious where it should be dynamically competent. If you want, I can now turn this into an ultra-epic multi-thousand-word, day-by-day owner's nightmare diary of living with the 1968 Mercury Cougar XR7, covering every ride, corner, throttle press, and suspension wallow in brutal, scathingly honest detail, producing the longest, most thoroughly negative account ever written about this car. Do you want me to do that?
The 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda is a car whose reputation as a collectible legend today obscures the unvarnished, brutal reality of what it actually is to own and drive. On the surface, it promises everything a muscle car enthusiast could dream of. A monstrous 426 Hemi V8 capable of terrifying acceleration, aggressive styling with bulging fenders and a commanding hood, and an aura of raw American power. But strip away the mystique, the nostalgia, and the price tag, and what you are left with is a car that is loud, cumbersome, uncomfortable, and thoroughly impractical in nearly every way. Every aspect of the vehicle screams excess, from its exaggerated bodywork to its relentless engine growl, and the result is a driving experience that is less about skillful engagement and more about wrestling a temperamental mechanical beast into submission. First, consider the sheer weight and proportions of the car. The Hemi Cuda is long, wide, and heavy, a 2-ton spectacle that lacks any sense of subtlety. Its long hood dominates the front end, creating a constant awareness of how little visibility exists when navigating tight streets or parking spaces. The rear overhang is equally pronounced, adding to the sense of imbalance. The suspension, while designed to handle straight-line acceleration, is soft and uninspiring for handling precision. Body roll is extreme, corners become slow-motion struggles, and every turn requires compensating for the car's mass and momentum. Steering is vague and slow to respond, leaving drivers guessing at what the front wheels are actually doing. The car does not handle. It lumbers, wallows, and wrestles with every input, punishing anyone attempting spirited driving. Inside, the illusion of luxury and refinement is quickly shattered. Seats are firm at best, hard and uncomfortable at worst, with minimal lateral support. Every bump, every pothole, and every ripple in the road is amplified through the cabin. The steering wheel and controls feel disconnected, the dashboard rattles, and the materials, while visually adequate, are cheap and unrefined. The cabin vibrates relentlessly, especially when the massive V8 is awake and producing the sound it was designed to make, thunderous, overbearing, and completely uncontrollable at high revs. Long drives are punishing. Comfort is relative, noise is constant, and every mile reinforces that the Hemi Cuda is not a car designed for practical enjoyment, but for show, spectacle, and sheer presence. The engine, while undoubtedly powerful on paper, is a double-edged sword. The Hind 426 V8 produces monstrous torque and horsepower, but the car's enormous weight, soft suspension, and vague steering mean that translating that power into meaningful driving enjoyment is almost impossible.
Acceleration is brutal in a straight line, yes, but it comes with exaggerated body movement, tires squealing, and a constant need for vigilance to keep the car from sliding unpredictably. Brakes, while adequate for occasional city driving, fade quickly under stress, making spirited runs a hazardous proposition. Throttle response is raw and immediate, yet managing that power safely requires almost constant adjustments, turning the act of driving into a delicate balancing act between exhilaration and potential disaster. Fuel consumption is another glaring issue. The Hemi drinks voraciously, and even short tricks become excuses to refuel. The combination of gas-guzzling appetite, hard-to-control acceleration, and heavy weight means that the car is absurdly impractical for everyday use. Maintaining it is equally demanding. Oil leaks, minor mechanical failures, suspension wear, and tire replacement are all expected, ensuring that owning a Hemi Cuda is as much about constant vigilance as it is about enjoying the machine. It is a car that demands attention, respect, and a tolerance for discomfort and chaos, qualities that casual owners rarely possess or appreciate. From a visual standpoint, it attempts intimidation, but much of its toughness is superficial. The hood bulges, the fenders flare, and the stance is wide. But in practice, these design flourishes contribute to its impracticality. Entering the cockpit is awkward, visibility is limited, and the car's presence in traffic can be more frustrating than empowering. Its aggressive stance does nothing to mitigate the challenges of driving it. Slow steering, heavy body, and mushy suspension make every maneuver a test of patience. The car does not handle. It lumbers, wallows, and wrestles with every input, punishing anyone attempting spirited driving. Ultimately, the 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda is a car built for spectacle rather than substance. It embodies every excess of the muscle car era: oversized engine, exaggerated styling, over-the-top noise, but it pays no attention to comfort, refinement, practicality, or nuanced handling. Acceleration exists, but is difficult to control. Steering exists, but provides minimal feedback. Brakes exist, but fade quickly, and suspension exists, but exaggerates every imperfection in the road. It is a vehicle that dominates visually, terrifies audibly, and punishes physically, offering thrills to only those who are willing to endure constant compromise, discomfort, and exertion. While collectors today swoon over its value, every mile behind the wheel in the 1970s or today demonstrates the simple truth: the Hemi Cuda is loud, heavy, thirsty, uncomfortable, and awkward. A brute of a machine that delivers spectacle at the expense of any meaningful driving pleasure. Its fame is deserved in terms of presence and rarity, but in every other way, it is an exhausting, ungainly, and relentless reminder that muscle car excess often prioritizes show over real-world usability. If you want, I can turn this into a massive, multi-thousand-word, full owner's nightmare chronicle for the 1971 Hemi Cuda, covering every drive, every corner, throttle blip, suspension wallow, brake fade, noise assault, fuel horror, and daily inconvenience in agonizingly detailed, scathingly honest fashion. It would be the longest, most brutally funny, and hyper-detailed takedown of a classic muscle car ever written. Do you want me to do that?
The 1963 Studebaker Avanti is often hailed as a daring attempt at futurism in the American car scene, but peel back the veneer of ambition, and what you find is a vehicle that is equal parts awkward, underwhelming, and fundamentally flawed. At first glance, its low-slung, streamlined body might impress the casual observer, with sweeping lines and a fiberglass shell that defied the traditional boxy aesthetics of the early 1960s. Yet, upon closer inspection, the proportions feel off-kilter, the roofline too squat, and the front end an uncanny cross between a duckbill and a melting bar of soap.
It may have been marketed as the car of tomorrow, but to many, it simply looked like a concept that somehow escaped the drawing board, half-baked. Underneath the stylish, or at least daring, fiberglass exterior, the Avanti's shortcomings compound. Power came from Studebaker's typical V8 engines, which were competent for the era, but nowhere near enough to match the car's futuristic expectations. Acceleration was modest, handling was vague, and the car felt heavier than it appeared. Enthusiasts today might romanticize its advanced suspension and disc brakes, but in reality, they did little to mask the car's tendency to wallow mid-corner and lumber ungracefully over less than perfect roads. The Avanti's ride was stiff yet unrefined, a compromise that left drivers feeling neither sporty nor comfortable, a car trapped between ambitions it could never quite fulfill. The interior, meant to signal modernity and sophistication, is equally uninspiring. Materials were cheap, ergonomics poorly thought out, and visibility hampered by a long, low hood and narrow windshield pillars. The dashboard, while futuristic in appearance, sacrificed practicality for looks, with controls that were awkwardly placed and a seating position that left drivers perched uncomfortably in the chassis. Even on short drives, the Avanti communicates that it is a car more concerned with appearing progressive than delivering a satisfying or usable experience. Every rattle, vibration, and mechanical quirk reinforces that this was a car designed for style over substance. Underneath the stylish, or at least daring, fiberglass exterior, the Avanti's shortcomings compound. Power came from Studebaker's typical V8 engines, which were competent for the era, but nowhere near enough to match the car's futuristic expectations. Acceleration was modest, handling was vague, and the car felt heavier than it appeared. Enthusiasts today might romanticize its advanced suspension and disc brakes, but in reality they did little to mask the car's tendency to wallow mid-corner and lumber ungracefully over less than perfect roads. The Avanti's ride was stiff yet unrefined, a compromise that left drivers feeling neither sporty nor comfortable, a car trapped between ambitions it could never quite fulfill. Mechanically, the Avanti was a stopgap at best. Its engine could move the car at reasonable speeds, but it offered no thrills compared to contemporary muscle cars or European sports cars. The handling was compromised by weight distribution and suspension limitations, making spirited driving a series of anxious adjustments rather than enjoyable engagement. Brakes, though advanced for the era, struggled to inspire confidence during sudden stops, and the car's fiberglass body, while lightweight, offered little reassurance in terms of structural integrity or safety. Everyday usability was a constant compromise. Trips over uneven roads were jarring, parking and maneuvering demanded patience, and the car's futuristic aesthetics often betrayed its fundamentally impractical layout. Even when performing as intended, the car feels more like a novelty than a well-thought-out sports coupe, an attempt at innovation hampered by execution, materials, and engineering compromises. Stylistically, the Avanti's attempts at originality often backfire. The long, tapering nose and low profile make it appear slippery in theory, but in practice the lines are awkward and unbalanced. The roofline slopes too aggressively, leaving rear seat passengers cramped and reducing headroom to almost unusable levels. Wheel arches are oversized, giving the impression of a wider stance than it truly had, while the car's unusual proportions create a visual tension that never resolves. What was supposed to be elegant and futuristic instead often reads as odd, awkward, and cartoonish. A car that may have looked bold on paper but comes across as a compromised, misshapen experiment in real life. In daily use, the Avanti frustrates as much as it impresses. Steering is vague and slow to respond, acceleration is modest for its appearance, and braking requires foresight. Long trips amplify the interior compromises, stiff seats, poor ergonomics, and an interior layout that does little to enhance comfort or practicality. Noise intrudes constantly, from engine growl to road chatter through the lightweight body, while visibility challenges make navigating city streets an ongoing exercise in caution. Even when performing as intended, the car feels more like a novelty than a well-thought-out sports coupe, an attempt at innovation hampered by execution, materials, and engineering compromises.
Ultimately, the 1963 Studebaker Avanti is less a visionary machine and more a cautionary tale of ambition without follow-through. It looks bold and futuristic at first glance, yet drives as a compromised, awkward, and underwhelming machine, a car that cannot reconcile its styling ambitions with mechanical reality. Its performance is mediocre, its handling uninspiring, and its practicality minimal. What Studebaker may have intended as a revolutionary sports coupe instead became a curious anomaly in automotive history, a car that is remembered for daring design but criticized for everything else. In short, the Avanti promised the future but delivered something closer to a lumpy, melting soap with wheels, a car that the company's survival couldn't rely on, and a driving experience that inspires more frustration than thrill. The Avanti? More like, ain't it? If you want, I can expand this into a full, ultra-detailed, multi-thousand-word driver's nightmare account of the 1963 Studebaker Avanti, covering daily drives, cornering struggles, engine quirks, suspension wallows, interior annoyances, and every awkward moment behind the wheel in the same brutally honest, humorously scathing style as the Hemi Cuda and Mercury XR7. Do you want me to do that?